Hey, is everything okay?
2 words, gay gasp. After 7 episodes of teasing this poor guy with slow-mo hair tosses and secret serenades, this season of Love Victor decides to become its own fanfic with episode 7, What Happens in Willacoochie, dropping Victor into a fantasy situation that quickly devolves into his nightmare scenario. While it features tantalizing moments of characters coming together and coming undone, this road trip episode takes some questionable detours before running out of gas on its way to the finish line. But before we check into the Venji Love Motel, let's check in on Creekwood's heteros, shall we? But really quickly so that we can get to the juicy stuff. Lake's so embarrassed with Felix that she wants to keep their relationship on the DL, and who can blame an image-obsessed gal like her? Felix is attentive to the needs of others, sociable, and cultivates a well-rounded spate of interests and hobbies. She couldn't take him anywhere. Meanwhile, Pilar's FOMO surrounding the friend she left behind in Texas hasn't abated, and that's literally all she's been up to this season. The writers strike some unlikely gold when they pair these 2 wayward souls together in one of the season's most low-key enjoyable subplots. Felix and Pilar undergo a social media detox to help them with their relationship troubles, and Anthony Turpel demonstrates that his greatest skill is adjusting his performance, if only by degrees, to complement his scene partner. He knows how to play doofy to emphasize Lake's buttoned-up naysaying, or self-assured to underscore Victor's uncertainty. In this episode, he plays up Felix's hopeless romanticism to ensure Isabella Ferreira's Eeyore-style mopiness lands with humor. Meanwhile, Ferreira uses this sweet and gentle subplot to show us shades of Pilar we haven't seen before, her self-awareness,
I'm kind of an acquired taste,
and her willingness to reach outside of her own personal dramas to lend a hand. And when these 2 actors blend their unique performance styles to discover a common ground together,
do you want to get coffee?
Sorry, didn't catch you.
which is essentially the best definition for so-called on-screen chemistry that I can muster, the writers open the door for some unexpected but totally welcome Felix shipping, which I dearly hope they explore in season 2.
You don't mind, do you?
Yeah, right, because I had such a great time hanging out with you.
I did too.
Not only would a Felix and Pilar romance veer a little off the beaten path, much needed for a show like this that sometimes revels a little too much in predictable, eager-to-please story turns, it would also act as a welcome source of drama and comedy for nearly every key relationship on this show, with Lake, Victor, and the Salazars forced to respond in some type of way to the unexpected romance, allowing for enticing opportunities for character development for nearly everyone in our Creekwood crew. And there's no one gasping for character development more right now than this resident heartthrob. Thankfully, with episode 7, the writers get around to outfitting him with things like a backstory,
Before I came out, I was kind of a mess.
likes,
Dolly is timeless.
and dislikes.
She bought them all, Victor. All of them.
Yet, it somehow doesn't feel like enough.
Seriously?
Victor and Benji embark on a road trip to get Brasstown's espresso machine fixed. Why it takes 2 employees of an understaffed coffee shop to go on a Sam and Frodo-like quest to complete this task, the episode doesn't bother to make clear. We learn more than we ever knew about this mysterious Lothario, including that he used to have a drinking problem fueled by the emotional burden of keeping his sexuality a secret, until a near-fatal car accident compelled him to come out. Since then, he and his family are on okay terms, but one gathers that tension still reigns in the Campbell household. Finally, we start to see some patterns emerge in Benji's character, mainly that he appears to have some trouble expressing himself with simple words. Given his prolonged struggle to keep his gay identity hidden from his parents, as well as the traumatic fallout, it's no wonder that he instead chooses the language of creativity and grand gestures to connect with those around him. If he's had this history of attempting to quell shame with destructive behavior, and if he's currently partnered with someone who minimizes his perspectives on romance and interpersonal connection, it then starts to track why he might find someone like Victor so refreshing.
You are so easy to talk to.
One gathers that he doesn't have a lot of trusted confidants in his life, and the simple act of candid conversation might be something of an uncharted practice for him. Alas, the bulk of this Benji psychoanalysis is based more on theory and hunches than what we actually see on screen. Benji remains underdeveloped after this episode and still by the end of episode 10, because we only ever witness Benji interact one-on-one with 2 people all season. As a counterexample, Andrew is someone who gets way less screen time and backstory than Benji, but he's able to transcend his broad high school jock trope with vulnerability and sympathy the more we observe which of his behaviors remain consistent and which behaviors change depending on whether he interacts with people he considers his competition, romantic prospects, subordinates, or admirers he'd rather keep in the friend zone. Near the top of my wish list for season 2 is a Benji-centric episode that helps pull this laconic man of mystery into sharper focus, as well as expanding his interpersonal palette on the show. We have no idea what a Benji Felix or Benji Pilar or even a Benji Andrew scene would look like, and that just means the writers have the potential to surprise us down the line with this character. Some of TV's most luminous characters didn't get unlocked, so to speak, until long after their vague introductions. There's hope yet for us to know more about Benji beyond his love of Dollywood and Junior Bacon cheeseburgers.
I wanted Wendy's real bad.
Something of an opposite issue exists with Victor. It's not so much that the show doesn't afford him any of the messy contours that make up a fully rounded character, but with this episode and the ones that follow, the writers demonstrate a growing over-reliance on viewers' sympathy for Victor, leading him to make a slew of self-serving and wrong-headed choices, which is all fine and good. Characters with pristine moral compasses are, of course, boring. But the problem arises when the show doesn't acknowledge or unpack the full weight of these choices. This episode is chock full of less than stellar behavior, not just from Victor, but from Armando, who acts shitty to Isabel.
What if I went back to giving piano lessons?
No.
And Mia, who acts exceptionally shitty to old flame Andrew.
I mean, you were just a very bad idea on a very bad night.
But the writers are careful to call out, explore, or contextualize these choices, with Armando still reeling over the Roger debacle, and Mia feeling abandoned by both her mother and now, more than ever, by Victor. Side note, episode 6 ends with Simon's text consoling Victor about not going all the way with Mia.
You've been trying to figure out if you're attracted to her. It sounds like tonight you realize that you're not.
But the next morning, Simon asks Victor,
How'd it go with Mia? Did you guys...
It seems Victor's DMs are getting so long-winded that Simon himself is losing track of the plot. Anyway, the writers missed the mark when it comes to contextualizing Victor's unfortunate actions.
You just finished up your repair.
So it's ready?
He straight up lies to Benji and Mia about the delays with the machine repair for the explicit purpose of spending the night in a motel room with Benji. And with that, Victor is no longer just a poor lovelorn schmo. He's consciously working a plan to nab himself a chance to cheat on Mia. It's a seriously creepy move on his part, especially considering that this trip is a workplace scenario. And at this point of the story, he and Benji really are more co-workers than close friends. Even their off-hours bonding time has mostly transpired in their place of employment. In and of itself, Victor's lie is a pretty delectable storytelling move, as it appears to capitalize on some groundwork laid early on in the season, particularly in episode 4, in which the Salazars grapple with lying and infidelity, a conflict that Victor only resolves for himself by not really resolving it.
I don't think I'll ever want to talk about it.
More so, Victor's increasingly deceitful and selfish behavior sets up a compelling opportunity for the show to explore how concealing your identity can start to erode your sense of duty to others. But the writers don't really commit to that opportunity, and the frustrating missteps are found all in the aftermath. Victor makes his move, and the scene itself ranks among the season's most memorable acting highlights. With poignant clarity, Michael Cimino captures the ecstasy and the agony of Victor's fateful choice. But afterward, we get a sense of how Victor and the writers intend to frame this moment. The writers decide to make the aftermath of the kiss not about Victor's guilt for his actions, but about his overall shame about being attracted to guys. He doesn't acknowledge that he's hurting people in his life, like his girlfriend who he planned to cheat on, or his crush who he manipulated into an intimate situation so that he could make a sexual advance on him in a professional setting. He does acknowledge that he feels bad about his sexuality because, as he generically puts it,
I don't want my life to be this hard.
This moment is probably the season's weakest instance of using Victor's DMs in a blunt tell-don't-show fashion to explain what's happening on screen. In this case, Victor's text to Simon muddies the waters about his emotional state more than it illuminates. And I think that this episode's credited writer, Danny Fernandez, could have just removed Victor's creepy lie from the equation altogether. I mean, why not just have the espresso machine stay broken as a valid reason for the guys to stay in the motel? I can understand the writing team wanting to make Victor more of an active participant in how he and Benji end up in a motel bed, but there's a fine line between a protagonist who's proactive and one who's straight up manipulative. Not to mention, this episode fails to answer crucial questions like, how did Benji react the next morning when they picked up the machine from the repairman, who certainly would have mentioned that it was already fixed the day before? And did Victor really sleep out in the hallway all night? If the writers didn't want to explore the full extent of Victor's icky behavior, they should have just kept him as the golden boy he's always been, instead of leaving him so tarnished. Of course, it appears that the aftermath of the kiss focuses less on Victor's questionable choices and more broadly on his self-loathing, so that he's able to engender sympathy from the viewers and from Simon.
It breaks my heart to hear you talk about yourself like that.
Who offers some it gets better style consolation.
I wish you were here right now so I could give you a hug.
Putting Victor in a New York state of mind. All in all, I did relish this episode's spicy developments, and I'm holding my breath to see where Victor's coming out misadventures take him next. What happens in Willacoochie might stay in Willacoochie, but on Victor's next journey, I hope that on the return trip, the writers make a pit stop to more compelling insights around queerness and accountability. So join me for episode 8, Boys Trip, in which Victor takes his avoidant, reckless tendencies to new extremes by choosing to run away and visit a total internet stranger to help him solve all of his problems. This can't possibly end well, can it? I mean, he's going to show up to Simon's doorstep unannounced. I cannot see this ending well. Until then, let us know in the comments. What career should Adrian pursue as a grown-up? Adorable music instruction spokesmodel? Head of Snuggy's research and development unit?
My pajamas are freezing.
Or he doesn't need a career because he is a warlock and can live deliciously for all eternity. Vote now!